Hey, what's going on guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'll be reviewing the PUMA PWR Nitro Squared. So 3 pros that come along with the PWR Nitro Squared is number 1, I think if you've been on the market looking for that shoe for HIIT and class style workouts, this can be a really good option. It's gonna be a lot more lively and bouncy than more of your dense training shoes that are gonna have a strength bias to their construction. And so if you're somebody who needs a shoe for some short runs, some jumping and some light strength work all blended into one session, or if you're doing like full body circuits and whatnot, this can be a great option to look into. The Nitro Foam Squared midsole is very responsive, and once you really break the shoe in, you get a bit more flexibility to it. And now that takes me into my second pro, which is if you like a bit more structure to your training shoe, this can be a good option, especially for versatile training. So with this shoe, obviously you have a much higher stack height. So you are gonna be taking the foot further from the floor, but this midsole wraps up on the lateral and medial side and you have a bit of arch in the shoe. So if you like more structured midsoles for training, whether that be for some arch support or just having general support for your feet, this can be a great option to look into. The third pro that I have with this model is the upper does a pretty good job at locking down the foot, but then also feeling lightweight and breathable. In this shoe, you have a light synthetic and textile overlay up here. You have some power tape here on the lateral side, and then back here in the boot, you have like this neoprene-esque booty style construction. So it does give you a nice level of support and lock down the foot while keeping the weight of the shoe relatively lighter, because with this thicker midsole, that is gonna add a little bit of bulk, even though that midsole is a slightly lighter weight material. Overall, this shoe has been surprisingly good for HIIT and class style workouts, but now let's talk about a couple of cons that I have with the PWR Nitro Squared. So 2 cons that I have with the PWR Nitro Squared is number 1, I think if you invest in this shoe, make sure you understand where they're going to excel. So with this model, what I mean by that is they're great for versatile training sessions, but if you're somebody looking for that singular shoe for both versatile training sessions and also strength workouts, this is probably not going to be your best bet. And now to elaborate a little bit further, because we have such a high stack height and because this midsole does have so much responsiveness to it, I found that it was pretty tough to really ground and stabilize the feet when lifting in this shoe. And now with this model on the spectrum of versatility and like strength or stability, this model is way over here on the versatility side of the spectrum. So for single leg work, for example, I notice this a lot because we do have a bit of toe spring, we have some beveling of the heel. I just found it very tough to ground the foot. And with that high stack height, I think you will find that it's a little bit tougher, I think, to stabilize when you're getting heavier with your strength work. So if you invest in this shoe, because it is $120, make sure that it is gonna have a slightly limited scope with its utility regarding where it's going to perform best. The second con that I have with this shoe is the upper and the forefoot can feel a little bit low volume at times. So I have an E-width foot, what I would call like a regular thickness of my foot, and this model I think fits my foot really well. But I could definitely see the forefoot up here being problematic for very thick feet or even high arches. So if you do invest in this shoe and you do have thicker feet, I would say expect like 1 to 2 weeks to break this model in. This upper should break in, it is pretty lightweight, but I will say that it might feel a little bit snug for the context of your foot anatomy, so keep that in mind. Also, as like a 2.5 con here, because this model does have a bit more arch here on the medial midfoot, you might not love this shoe if you have flatter feet, so definitely food for thought there. And now I think the upper will be accommodating for a flatter foot. I just don't want you to like have too much of a cave here and have too much foot overhang on the medial side if you do end up opting for the shoe with a flatter foot anatomy. So keep that in mind before you invest in this shoe. But now let's talk about the performance of the PWR Nitro Squared. To chat on the performance of the PWR Nitro Squared, I'll discuss how the shoe performs for lifting, versatile training, short runs, and daily wear. In the context of lifting, this model can work for lighter and moderate strength sessions. So this is not going to be your training shoe for pushing your barbell lifts, for even going super heavy with single leg workouts. It will work for some lighter single leg work, but I think with this thick stack height and the toe spring and the beveling of the heel, it's gonna be very tough to find stability in this shoe if you're really trying to push your strength. And now for context there, for my single leg work with dumbbells, I didn't love this model once I started moving past like 60 and 65 pounds in each hand. And so if you're working below that, you should be fine. But I noticed myself rocking, and obviously because I've used so many different training shoes, I might also just have more of a nuance and context as to what feels stable and what doesn't. But this model is definitely on the side of feeling not as stable just because we have so much midsole. And then in the context of barbell lifts and machine work with leg presses, like 300, 350 pounds is where I started to notice the midsole compress and my feet start moving more. And then with barbell work, 275 175-pound deadlifts, 185-pound squats. That is probably what I would limit yourself with in this model, just to make sure you're getting the most out of the stability for your training. Plus with the high stack height, don't even get me started, but you're not gonna wanna use this shoe for a deadlift. So if you invest in this shoe for strength work, just keep in mind that it's going to have some limitations, especially in the context of stability. When it comes to versatile training, I have thoroughly enjoyed this shoe. So for example, for my workouts with broad jumps, sled work, some kettlebell work, I like this model a lot. And because we have this wrap here on the lateral and medial side up here in the forefoot, this model is really great for lateral work. So if you're doing skater strides, if you're doing lateral sled drags, I liked how this model felt. And I honestly feel like it could be a good option too for folks who do high rocks and you want a bit of a more responsive ride, but still a shoe that can work for certain sled pushes or even strength elements of that competition. So I see this as a really good like class focused workout shoe, HIIT focused workout shoe, and even high rocks focused workout shoe. Now I will say something to notice with this model is that when you're doing kettlebell work, especially swings and snatches, because we have a lot of toe spring in this model, I think you can feel a little bit forward pitched at times. So definitely keep that in mind as you wear this shoe, as you break them in, and as you adjust to the heel to toe drop and how this midsole is constructed. But for versatile training, this model I think is a hit. Now when it comes to short runs, I think this model should work for 1, 2, even 3-mile runs. It feels very good on the foot and honestly feels very comfortable for different speeds. And even when running a little bit slower with a heel strike, because we have a beveled heel and a bit more of a softer heel back here, I think it can accommodate a lot of different running mechanics really well. So if you want that shoe for tacking on a couple miles pre or post workout, this can be a really good option. For daily wear, I also found this shoe to be pretty dang comfortable. Now, is it my favorite shoe for daily wear? No, because it doesn't have as much of a low profile vibe. I like lower stack heights for daily wear. I like feeling the ground a bit more. Also, the toe box isn't the widest, so it will work if you want to wear a shoe out and about for errands and some walking, but it's not necessarily my favorite shoe to wear all day, and that's just my personal preference because I prefer more ground feel. With this shoe, you're not going to have as much ground feel because we have a super high stack height and a very thick midsole. So while you can wear it for walking and it's pretty comfortable and it does have a nice breathable upper, keep in mind that it may not be the best shoe for all day wear if you want a flatter foot position and if you just want a bit more ground feel with your shoes. Overall though, I have enjoyed the PWR Nitro Squared, and I think if you invest in this shoe, just make sure you know exactly what you're getting with this model and then cross-reference that with your needs. So when it comes to the price of the PWR Nitro Squared, you can expect to pay $120. Now, I put this model in like the same class or category of training shoe as the Nike Free Metcon 5 and the Nike Air Zoom TR1. Both of those shoes are very similar regarding versatility, but I will say I almost find this model to be a bit more bouncy and a bit more accommodating for different styles of workouts and even for short runs. So I think if that is something you're after, the price point can definitely make sense for the shoe. And also Puma often has sales. I found a coupon for this model when I bought it, and that was back in like early December. So definitely shop around if that is something you're after as well and you're looking to knock off a couple of dollars on this shoe. We are back with another Maui cameo, and he is once again asking me to tell you to subscribe to the channel. That said, back to the review. Thanks, buddy. You really helped me get the likes and the subscribes. All right, so now let's answer the question, who should buy the PWR Nitro Squared? Number one, I think if you want that shoe primarily for classes or like HIIT style workouts or even high rock style training, this can be a really good option to look into. It has a nice blend of responsiveness and enough stability for light to moderate strength works in those verticals. The second context where I think the shoe makes a lot of sense is if you're somebody that likes a lot of lateral and medial support in your shoe. So when you're going laterally and then moving medially and you like a bit more structure in your forefoot, this shoe can be a really good option to explore. And the third context is for anybody who needs a bit more arch support or you like a slightly more structured midsole and having a bit more material separating your foot from the floor, I think you'll feel right at home with this model once again. And this upper I think does a pretty good job at locking down your foot if that is a need that you have. Now, who shouldn't buy this shoe? Number one, if you need a shoe for heavier strength training, steer clear of this model. It is not going to be your best bet. Again, on that spectrum of versatility and stability, this model is way over here for versatility. The second context is if you have a very flat midfoot or if you have an exceptionally wide foot, you might want to steer clear of this shoe. While its forefoot is pretty wide, it does have a pretty aggressive taper and a low profile upper end up in the toe box. So that might be something to consider if you fall into those specific foot anatomies. So when it comes to sizing and fit of the PWR Nitro Squared, I think most lifters and athletes should be safe going true to size in this model. So for context, I have an E-width foot, and what I would describe is like a regular thickness or a regular arch, and this model fits me pretty true, and I don't really have any issues with the sizing of this model. Now I will say say, if you have an exceptionally wide foot or exceptionally flat foot, this model might not align with you, but I think for most folks with narrow, medium, and even slightly wider feet, true to size is a safe call in this model. All right, so now let's cover the weight, heel to toe drop, and insole in the PWR Nitro Squared. For my size 10 shoe here, we have a weight of 12 ounces. The heel to toe drop on this model is not disclosed, and when I reached out to PUMA, they didn't really help me a ton, but it feels like a 5 to maybe 6 millimeter heel to toe drop. You do have a slight pitch forward in this model, so I don't think it's super low. But again, that is just my guess, and this model does have a thin foam removable insole. All right, so now let's cover the construction of the PWR Nitro Squared. Up here on the upper around the toe box, you have a synthetic upper that wraps around the entirety of this shoe's toe box. You have this power tape layer here on the lateral side to help give this additional structure as well. The upper is made with synthetic and textile materials, so this is all consistent through the forefoot and midfoot. It's a bit more lightweight, and then you have like this neoprene sock liner or booty construction back here, has a bit of stretch to it. You also have an external heel tab, and then back here on the boot, you have an additional rubber overlay for additional support, like it's a TPU-ish rubber material back here. You have some PUMA branding here on the midfoot on the lateral side, and then looking at the lacing system, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 core eyelets that go up, and you have a pretty long lacing system. So you will have to probably double knot this when you are lacing it. For the midsole here, we have the Nitro Foam midsole. So this is a nitrogen infused foam, and it's very lightweight and it has a lot of responsiveness to it. And there's also a lateral and medial wrap here on the forefoot, which I personally like because it does help give you a bit more structure when doing lateral movement. On the outsole, you have a full rubber outsole with a PUMA grip material. You do have a break here in the midfoot that's pretty harsh, and that's also why I don't love this model for exceptionally flat feet, where you do want a bit more width at your midfoot. So keep that in mind. But overall, I think that's the gist of this shoe's construction. Some of the materials used in this model are pretty dang neat, so definitely check out the product page before you buy if you want to learn more. But if you have additional questions on this model's construction, drop a comment down below. All right guys, that's my review of the PUMA PWR Nitro Squared. Honestly, I have really started to like this shoe. Generally, I don't love models that have super thick midsoles, but I think for HIIT workouts, this model feels really good for that context. If you have additional questions on this shoe, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.